Welcome back. It's day 2 at the VapExpo Las Vegas here at the Las Vegas Convention Center. I'll be your host, Ashley Hansen, Director of Marketing and Development at Twist eLiquids and Brewed and Bottled Manufacturing. We've got an amazing panel this morning. We're going to kick it off real hot and jump right into the evolution of the industry. Since its inception in 2012, the vape phenomenon has been felt worldwide. But here on U.S. soil, we've continued to pioneer in design, detailed flavor profiles, groundbreaking campaigns in advocacy and marketing, and of course the rise of the vape influencer. Joining me today, I have Max Hulker, Director of Business Development at Samplebox. Hello.
Hi.
Brendan Mcdermott, CEO at Solace. Hi, Brendan.
Hello.
Kurt Sonderegger, CEO and founder at Cafe Racer Vape.
Hi there.
Did I do a good job on that one?
You got it.
Okay, whew. Vitali Servutas, CEO at Cotton, and many more. That's just the hot one now, yes.
Always innovating.
Yes. So thank you, gentlemen, for joining me. I know you're very busy and you have lots of meetings to attend, so we're going to get right into it. So I would love to know at what point the industry was when you personally entered the space, as far as products, brands, hardware, marketing, advocacy. Was it even being discussed on a bigger scale? Vitali, let's start with you.
All right, so I entered the industry in around December of 2008. We started with the Cigalikes, and the market was very new. I think I was one of the fifth company in the United States to start it. So we're pretty much going to trade shows and teaching people what vape is and blow a cloud of vape, and people looking at it is like, what is this, So it was an exciting time, a lot of education, and obviously we continue educating people what vaping is, and so always innovating.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so it's a great industry.
Kurt?
I actually started in 2007, not to one-up you. But I was the first employee at what is now Juul. It was, at that time, Plume. And there really was no vape industry. There were a couple of Cigalikes. We had to order stuff from China to see what the early prototypes were like, and we had a heat not burn device called Plume. And seeing the industry grow has been phenomenal. I think starting around 2012, we saw a huge growth. You had all kinds of product innovations with mods and tanks and sub-ohm and flavor, and by the time I started Cafe Racer Vape in 2015, it was definitely a full-blown industry.
Brendan?
I started in 2013, not to one up anybody, no, I'm kidding. Yeah, much later it seems. The space was an interesting place. It was there were a lot of brands already in existence thanks to these guys helping to pioneer this space. Sub-ohming had really taken over, and it was all about starting to begin the brands. I think the trend that came slightly after was kind of the one-off flavors, but branding and brands itself were still what was there. So I started at another company and learned the ropes a little bit, learned how to flavor make, and learned how to what supposedly what the customer wanted. And since then, it's been an interesting journey.
Cool. Well, I mean, I lose to all of you. I started in 2015. Samplebox came around about a year before that, and I joined up mostly for customer service. I came in right at the peak of when things like this were becoming really popular, the birth of the expos. People were getting 40 by 40 booths, just going ham with it, and really people were sponsoring race cars. I think that's really when people began to realize that there was enough money and interest and passion here to really drive the industry. And it was a very exciting time to get into it.
Absolutely. And you've done a lot for the consumers at large. I mean, how many subscribers do you have with Samplebox?
We never give out the full number.
Oh, excuse me. So sorry. How about YouTube subscribers? Because I know you focus a lot on that.
Yeah, we actually just hit about 125,000.
Awesome. Perfect. So I would like to know what key events over the last, if you really wanted to put it decade, have taken place to get us to where we're at now in the vape space. Max, we'll just kick it back off to you.
Sorry, what was the question?
What key events do you think have taken place strategically in the last, maybe in your experience, 3 years, that have gotten us to where we are now? Maybe the incorporation of salt or regulation?
The regulation obviously is undeniable. It's a huge part of what's happening right now. I think really more than anything else, the birth of direct-to-consumer has really become a huge, huge part of it. The evolution of the individuals in the industry and realizing how important it is to market and actually attach not just distros, but actually individual consumers and having lifetime value and tracking metrics like customer acquisition has become much more of a focus, I think, for a large part of the industry. If I were to really just sum things up, I think direct-to-consumer online is really just kind of what put us when we're at right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say the biggest change has been the professional nature of the industry. When I began, it was a lot of who can make the most noise, and now it's who can do the best business, which is clear to any evolution of any industry in particular. There's been a number of key devices that have come out that have really changed the space, and then I would like to also say that going back to these guys' time in the space and how to make liquid pre-sub-ohm is really what evolved, and your work with Juul, is really what had changed the space into a more of a salts category. Solace had banked really early on the fact that when I started vaping, I was 22, and then when I got a little older, I realized I'm going to have a real job, I'm going to have a real desk, and I'm not necessarily going to want a big bottle with some vulgar image on it and a big device that is non-concealable, right? So as the consumer itself evolved, the industry had to evolve with them, and then second, in that same nature and vein would be the incorporation of vape as an everyday product. It's no longer a subculture. It's certainly a hot topic among everybody. What I recall very vividly was a few veterans I knew from the Vietnam War, friends of my mother and stuff like that. They would go to these lodges. I'm from the East Coast, and that's very popular out there, whether it be an Elk Lodge or this. And these people had started learning how to vape, right? They're ex-cigarette smokers, or they helped quit smoking with these devices,
Which
right?
Which devices in particular?
Those were sub-ohm at the time, believe it or not. So when we could even make it a little bit easier with them, the one I remember specifically was a Sigelli 150 that everyone seemed to have, right? And it really was
the
something.
Soccer moms?
That thing was soccer moms are older veterans, whatever it may be. But when someone that is not so technology prone or savvy was willing to learn what this can do, and it was satisfying their crave, if we could make it even more easy to transition from a cigarette to that, which is what salts ultimately ended up doing, and then the devices had to come around to accommodate that new technology, and I think we're moving in the right space in the right direction because of the evolution of that in particular. But I would also go to say regulation has definitely changed every one of our perspectives on this and our nature in business specifically.
Absolutely.
Thanks. I would definitely agree with the milestones. Probably the first milestone was from Sigalike to open tank vaping, and then obviously from there to sub-ohm. And I think the big one for all of us in the industry was when Aspire Atlantis came out. It was the first sub-ohm tank. So you took something, instead of having to make your own coils and all the things that go along with that, simplified it, made a sub-ohm tank, and then we saw an explosion of vaping, an explosion of flavor, an explosion of companies. And I think we've almost come full circle. When Juul came out, basically it's simple and it's satisfying.
Is that what you have in your hand right now?
No, this is a Moto. It's made by Cafe Racer. But basically taking it, stripping everything away from it, making a simple, satisfying device that also doesn't necessarily blow big clouds, because we don't always want to call attention to ourselves, whether you're at home or in the office. So it's been a really interesting ride. I don't know where we're going to go from here, but it's like a rocket ship. You just kind of hold on and see where you go.
There you go.
Yeah, so I totally agree. On the hardware side, obviously we see a complete circle, right? We started with the Sigalikes, sub-ohming, box mods, right? All that stuff is coming. I see the full circle where the pod devices, close to exits are coming back. And I think down the road, probably, because we still have issues with the pod systems, right? So the Nick salts and the juices obviously added that whole new wave of the closed systems. I think down the road we're gonna do another circle where like box mods are gonna come back, as we all know, there's still like those devices, the batteries fail, right? You gotta constantly change it. Like most people have 3 or 4 units. One breaks every 2-3 weeks, right? So I think over time, again, that was the problem with the disposables back in the days. Yeah. Sigalikes, right? Batteries were constantly breaking this. So that was the wave why people went to better juice, more clouds, right? Now we're kind of going less of that. And then I think we're going to do a full circle again and say, hey, I want more clouds, I want better flavor. We perfected Nick salts, now we want even better stuff, right?
Interesting prediction.
Yeah.
All right.
So
Well, I entered in 2015, and I know I had to fall flat on my face like 10 times before, figuring things out. So something I always like to do for anyone who's aspiring to enter this space is just try to tell them a few of the things that I might have done differently along my path, given the opportunity. I'd love to know, if you could go back to when you first got in, what would you, if anything, would you make different decisions? Would you go in a different direction? Would you tweak your business model given the opportunity?
I mean, not to go into anything too specific, I think more than anything what we do is we double down on what our core actual competencies are. And I think that's probably applicable to any industry and any individual in any industry. I mean, if I could go back in time, I basically just really focus on the 2-3 things that either I myself or us as a company did best, and really just double everything back into that, rather than trying to explore and expand and adapt to a changing regulatory market and a changing space. Really just trying to get back to what really got us where we were in the first place.
I'd specifically say that what I could do differently would be not riding the waves and the trends, right? What is clearly, as you had asked in our last question, what are the specific times that things have changed in this space? I think a lot of people had some unique ideas, but they saw what was working in the industry and they decided to either kind of copy it or do their own version of it instead of really working with what, as you said, your core competency is. I could go, if I could go back in time, I would have jumped ship from my last company faster. It's probably the first thing I would do, and then after that would be is that we really had salts dialed in pretty early, and we were told incorrect information as to who owns patents behind different things and what was actually allowed in the space.
Who was giving you that information?
It was all over. If you've been in this space long enough to know that the rumor mill can exist all over the place. But again, every single time you launch something new is tens of thousands of dollars behind the marketing, behind the development of it. And also, as you said, you fall on your face. It's unlikely to launch something first and then immediately that work. You have to tweak it slightly, right? And get some customer response. So if I had that opportunity, I would have probably launched Salts even a year earlier and really had dialed in back to if we had predicted the full circle working, the disposables, the pod systems, the existence of that. I mean, we have not been able to change one thing in our juice or anything for 2 years now. If I had those 2 years back, what we understand and what we're able to do for foreign markets at this point is remarkable with salts, but there's only a certain amount of information and technology we had before that, right? So if I had those 2 years back, or if I was able to start a little earlier, I think we would even have a better product for the consumer today and have even better opportunities to increase the health benefits of it.
Absolutely.
Cool. I think the two things I would do differently is one, what Max said, the direct-to-consumer model, recognizing that, we recognize that much later, had we started with that, the feedback loop of information from your consumers, what they like, what they don't like, how often are they buying, what nicotine levels are, is so valuable to a company. We're primarily a manufacturing distribution company, but we do have we have about 1,000 customers that buy from us direct, and that information is super valuable to us moving forward. And probably the second thing is recognizing that especially with the nic salts, that you need to pair nic salts with the right device. And probably we came out with our device pretty recently, but I would have loved to have gone back in time and come out with an open system MTL device 2 years ago. The market's a little bit crowded for that right now. We're focusing on what we're doing, and we're just coming out with one simple device. But if I could go back in time, I would definitely probably go down there. I wanted to avoid hardware because it's a little bit of, it's a minefield. You have to have huge economies of scale. You pay enormous amounts of money for molds and all these things. You're manufacturing in China. So that was pretty scary landscape. I think knowing what we do now, we probably could have gone in there and rolled up our sleeves, and we would have taken some bumps and lumps, but probably would have a great MTL device on top of it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, so for me, obviously, over years, there's a lot of learning experiences, and the way we look at it is like, I wish we could have learned about the consumers faster, right? What we didn't realize, like any other company, we used to think like, hey, if there's a Marlboro smoker, once they hit our tobacco or menthol, that's it. They're hooked. They're going to stay with us, Huge learning experience for everyone, I think. It was just like, nope, I'm going to try this and try the other and the fourth and the fifth, right? So it was like learning all that, like the consumer itself, it's like we have consumers that used to stick to one thing, and now we have a whole new consumer of like, hey, I'm going to try anything, everything, any different brand, as long as it's good. Yeah, so that was the big thing. It's like a huge learning, and obviously, if we would have learned that earlier and faster, we could adjust faster. It's amazing how quickly the new devices come on the market, right? Like you look at the iPhone, it gets released once a year, right? So we think, oh well, we got our Kanger mods, and they're gonna stay for a year. Nope, a month later, you got other mods and other mods. So that speed is so fast in this industry, and a lot of companies, I think, will have to adjust, and that's where we adjusted slower. So I wish we could have adjusted much faster.
I want to stick with this evolution because that's what we're talking about. So I'd like to know, now that we've all thought back to when we first entered the industry, and just one specific challenge that you faced very early on that you are not facing now, and what it has been replaced with.
Oh, man.
The thing that kept you up at night in the beginning.
I'll tell you one. I can start on this one.
Okay.
So as a hardware in general, the one thing, I don't think it's fixed yet. I think it's getting better. Leakage of cartridges keeps me up at night since 2008.
Wow.
And it is. I know the whole system.
You're
Obviously,
right.
it has to, but it leaks and everybody hates it. Everybody gets it in their mouth. And to this day, like a regular consumer, they care about that, and I wish someone would figure out how to do it. I know a lot of companies are working on that, but that's the thing that I think if we could fix that thing, I think it would be amazing.
Kurt, what do you think?
Probably one of the things that I wish I could have changed is when the 60 ml Chubby Gorillas came out. We had a really nice 30 ml square bottle.
You did.
People loved the label, and we were sticking with that for a couple of reasons. We loved the bottle. Also, we didn't want to have two sets of SKUs, and that train went by so fast, and we moved pretty quickly, but not quickly enough. And definitely, if I could go back in time, I'd love to. I would have just said all 60s, drop the 30s, and been right on the front of it instead of running after the back of the train.
We still get consumers that ask about those 30 ml bottles all the time. They're just like, I want that square bottle back. It's great.
We still have some.
I was going to say, maybe there's a chance to put in a PO.
That's true.
Brendan?
That actually goes to exactly what I was going to say is what you guys were just talking about. Honestly, if I could have gone back in time, I don't think specifically my fault. In fact, Salas has a lot of collaborative partners, and we work very well with other people. I think if we, as an industry, we could have collaborated on more things, discussed more things instead of, I think everyone here can say that they're a capitalist. That's the point of us being here. But we instead of realizing that we were against each other, realized we were together. And I think our best relationships as a company are not necessarily with a distributor. It's with other companies in this industry. We've had a lot of successful collaborations and a lot of successful information transfers, and that's really, really, really important. It maintains that for us, and I think welcoming of that would have been possible. Even the trade shows compete with each other. There's trade shows going on at the same time. When you came in the industry in 2015, there was 4 going on at one time, remember? Right. And I'm like, how do you even attack this remotely, How do you know? And of course, everyone you didn't go to, everyone said it was really good, right. And it probably was a lie, but whatever it may be, And I really think that, again, we really could have done something special together if we could get a few years back. And a lot of these companies putting their brains together and realizing that there was a powerhouse on our hands, and instead of taking each other's market shares and chipping away at each other. Not to break the mold, but there's one other thing, is I had a brand out, as you were saying, this reminded me, you said 30 mils going to 60 mils. I had 60 mils even before Naked, and I pulled from market 2 weeks before that, went back to 30s. And if I could possibly rethink that, I could possibly go back and just, I see, Wee has done an incredible job with that brand and represented himself quite well. So I'm not sure the success would have been mimicked, but that's one thing that keeps me up at night.
What triggered that?
No one wanted the 60 mils. That was crazy. Everyone said it was too big. Their customers weren't to come back fast enough. It was about maybe 3 weeks or 4 weeks before Naked launched, maybe it was the price point, maybe it was whatever, but it just seemed what it was going. We've always been interested in nicotine technology, so tobacco-free nicotine had come out around that point, and we wanted, as soon as we saw the 60 mils weren't really tracking, we thought, maybe we'd give the opportunity towards tobacco-free nicotine. And at the time, the cost was so high, we had to go down to 30 mils again. And by the time we had turned around those bottles, we lost that opportunity. But again, you said you fell on your face 5 times. It's
10.
Solace itself has like 8 partners, which is a good thing and a bad thing. But ultimately, what really changes things for us is all of us have failed beforehand, and that really makes things quite special. You know, we call it like the land of misfit toys. Every person hasn't had a position somewhere else or wasn't appreciated somewhere else somehow knocks on our door, and we find the best opportunity for them, or at least we try to.
It's nice.
Nice, yeah.
I mean, going back to exactly what you said about collaboration and information sharing, I think that's been like a huge missed opportunity. I mean, I can think of the amount of times. I mean, knowing what we know now, I mean, especially with now Juul being on the market and being such a huge dominating force, I mean, I don't think really anybody had it put into scale, or at least I didn't, as to exactly how small our slice of the industry is really, as to how big it is out there. And if you go back in time and actually be like, hey, like, there's so much more to do together than there is to compete right now, like, we totally should.
Yeah.
But, I mean, besides that, the main thing I would really go back and change more than anything else is learning the economics of growth and scaling. I mean, if we're going from, like, fulfilling boxes out of an apartment to a 300 square foot, like, room to our first fulfillment center to our now 60,000 square foot center, like, in Arizona, like, realizing the steps it takes to scale that fast so not everything is a rush, I would ramped it up way faster. That was a huge learning experience.
Yeah. So we definitely touched on this already, but I want to talk about Nic salts. How have they affected the environment of the market and consumer consumption?
Sorry, affected or infected?
Affected.
Okay, good. Thank God.
No, I would never say infected. Affected. You know what, and Brendan, why don't you lead this one?
Sure, Nic salts has changed everything. We, as I said, we were the first salt brand out there. We weren't the first salt brand to get popular. We were the first one out there. I still remember there were a few cash and carries or distros that were nice enough for us to let us stand outside these little flyers, and we'd hand them to people as they came in. It was like trying to hand out your mixtape at Times Square. No one wanted it, you know, and they throw it on the ground right in front. It was like so insulting.
They were more curious?
They weren't. Everyone just said, "I don't want a salt-flavored juice," and it was like, "What? Just wait for us. Let me explain this to you," you know. And what you had touched on about the consumer itself is what made Nic salts work. It wasn't the distros. At that point, the distros had warehouses full of juice that wasn't moving, you know. So what had to change things was customer demand. And then we had to learn. And then we had to learn how to contact that customer directly and how to work with them to explain that to their shop. So we went on a large campaign of information giving and really educating, and that took months before we even saw any real traction behind what salts was, right? And it was realizing, as you said, about even our space versus what's actually out there. Salts was the same thing. No one really realized what that would do or how that would carve out. So we had to make displays that would actually put an area, because people say, I don't have enough shelf space for that. You know, so we have to basically make displays for them and say, all right, you have your shelf space now, and we have to find the right devices. I mean, at the time, the iCare wasn't even out. I think the MyJet might have been out, but we were using like basically non-sub-ohm tanks, like pre-Atlantis coil tanks to use these things, you know, and educating that you can't be sub-ohm this, you can't this, it was a liability. We saw what it was, but so much in the industry had to change, and so much had to readapt, and that's what was so amazing to watch, was everyone coming to, you know, there had been a lot of gimmicks, there had been a lot of fads, there had been a lot of things, but salts actually worked. It was an easy transition for a cigarette smoker, right? And that was what was incredible for me.
The sound that I'm hearing makes me a little nervous, so just to warn you guys, if the main speaker comes on, if you want to take off your headset, if it's too loud, I don't want anyone to have ear damage from what could potentially happen.
Yeah,
but sorry, Kurt.
I think expanding on what you were saying, I think salts, once it did become established, and I mean, Juul's certainly made a big step in that.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I think the most important thing was it was about satisfying smokers' craving for nicotine. And with traditional nicotine and vape products, you don't feel the nicotine kick nearly as fast as you do with a cigarette. So the success rate of getting smokers to switch to vaping was probably less than 10%. Whereas with nicotine salts, you're seeing rates of like 25, 30, 40%, which is still not, you know, it could be higher, but significantly more than with traditional vaping. So it's a numbers game. If we can get 100 people smokers to try vaping, and we're only getting 5 or 6 to succeed, we needed to up that game. And I think you're seeing that with salts in the open MTL devices, you're seeing it with pod systems, you're certainly seeing it with Juul on the mass market level. So I think the progress of going from 95% smokers and 5% vapors to at least a 50-50 is now well within sight, and it's because of Nic salts. It's the biggest change, the biggest thing that's come to the industry so far.
Yeah, so I'll add on the top of that. So So Nick Salts is definitely a very positive, right? But I think I'm looking at the European market and USA market, and where like the TPD has the limit on the 20, right, in Europe. And so even though they have the salts now, I still, like, even my last trip where we see in France, drivers are still smoking cigarettes, right? And we say, do you vape? And I do vape, but I also smoke cigarettes. Why? Because it's not enough, right? So even though the salts are here, like, the nic level has to be up there as well. I think, you know, what is that nicotine level? We're still trying, like, industry accepts 50 in the United States. Right. Oh, that's a new thing, right? Because, what is the actual, like, back in the days was 24 milligrams, I think, 2.4%. That's the kind of the standard, right? Juul brought it up to 5, like now they say is, youth and all that is very addictive, so is there like a level like 3.5 or something like that with the whole nicotine level? So I think if you have the sauce.
Okay, CBDIO and VapExpo people, 2 quick announcements. At 2 p.m. in the VIP room, there's going to be a talk by Avail on PMTA filings, what it takes and what you need to know to get your product through PMTA.
Sorry for the interruption.
So yeah, I'll just finish my last. Nick Salt is definitely helpful if we get the nicotine level as well up there, especially for Europe. I think that's continue improving the whole chemistry of this. I think it's going to be huge.
Can I just jump in there for a second?
Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right. I think that same question we had earlier is what would we do differently if we had the time? I think even the regulators would probably have a nice thing to say about that. What could be different, right? Because I think it's undeniable that salt is assisting, as you had said, in raising that rate off of cigarettes. But the problem is there's a 20 milligram level. In fact, TPDs even says that you can't alter nicotine for efficacy. So we're in this really weird gray area over there, right? Yeah. And most people don't know this, but salts above 38 to 40 watts turns back to freebase. So you can't even put that in a sub-ohm device and make the 20 milligrams more worth it, right? So I think that if they had their opportunity, might see that particular part of the category as a more useful transition and kind of maybe reshape the regulations, if you will, right? Yep.
I'm going to let him wrap up.
Sure.
Product mixes and regulatory for retail stores. That's going to be.
You guys are thirsty, please.
At 4 p.m. at the Blue Booth, Carson Greer will be auctioning off, raffling off the custom Post Malone piece. And to enter that, you need to get a raffle ticket at the Blue Booth. That's going to be at 4 p.m. Also, if you're submitting for flavor awards, do that at the Vape stage. See you go.
Thank you. That reminds me, I forgot to submit. One flavor. I submitted the rest. Okay. Done. Back on it. Back live. And thank you. That brings up a good point. I don't know if you had finished when you
I did. I
interrupted.
think it's his turn.
So I want to know, what's your end consumer saying? You guys have...
So we're only just now actually starting to look at getting into the salt space.
Okay.
And for the most part, I don't know if this is really known by a lot of people on the panel, a lot of people in the industry. We do a lot of focus grouping of our members at all times. We bring people in all the time about all sorts of things, mostly about consumer awareness of products or use of certain products. And we held off on salts for a long, long time because the majority of focus groups in salt we did was 75% of people would say, I have no idea what this is. Or is it, I don't want to taste salt-flavored liquid, right? Like all the time. I think if you go back to the last question, if you go back in time and you're in the salt industry, I think one of the main things you can do is rebrand Nick Salt as something that didn't have salt in the name. But so we held off forever about that, and we're only just now seeing that the level of consumer awareness is making economical sense to actually get into the space without having to devote so much time to educating the consumer. So my hat's off to guys like you who are doing a lot of that work for us. But yeah, it's been a pain.
Out of curiosity, if you were to tweak your original sample box for the salt market, what would that business model look like?
So another thing we did in our focus group is finding out that currently the 30 ml Nick Salt bottles that we're currently using and 50 milligram, which I think is a standard size nicotine strength right now in the salt game, that lasts your average consumer about 45 days. That one bottle, which is a crazy amount of turnover time. I mean, if I could tweak the original salt model, I mean, if I could tweak the entire industry, we'd go back to 10 and 15 mil bottles across the board.
That's a good point.
Right. I mean, the explosion in both just how we've destroyed margins and increased sizes, I think is only hurting everybody. And the salts is just only going to be even more kind of empathetic with that, with customer turnover.
I'm loving this lovely sound. I didn't know we were going to get a concert in here. So I want to know what successful marketing is going to look like in 2019 and beyond. Not just domestically, but worldwide. You want to start, Kurt? How many countries is Cafe Racer in now?
I don't know, something around 42. But I think the term marketing is a little bit misleading because a lot of times we look at marketing as customer acquisition. And customer acquisition isn't, while it's something we talk about, but it's really smoker acquisition. We're not trying to acquire new customers. And I think everyone here can agree that. But really, it's smoker acquisition. So our marketing really needs to be tailored towards maximizing smoker acquisition. And I think we're moving towards that slowly. It's not about giant clouds. It's not about tricks. I'm sorry if I offend anyone out there if they're really into giant clouds and tricks, but that really, I think that put our industry back a number of years actually, because media would come to an event like this, they'd see the cloud contest, that's what would be on the news. Everyone would look at that and say, that looks ridiculous. I don't want any part of it. I'm going back to smoking.
That's what the stage would have been for. We wouldn't be
up there.
Exactly.
There's a time and place for that kind of stuff. But did that have anything to do with getting people to stop smoking and start vaping? And I think we're really starting to move towards that. So I think, Juul's campaign now and people telling their stories about quitting smoking is a really good direction to go in. And I think everyone in this room really needs to focus on smoker acquisition, and I think we're slowly getting there, step by step.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Vitali?
Yeah, so I totally agree with Kurt here. At the beginning, the message for the e-cigarettes was, right, to get the smokers, get off the cigarettes, right? Then that message got a little bit lost, for a few years. I think this message is coming back again. What's exciting for me were, a lot of countries worldwide are starting to really accept smoking. There's a lot of countries that still ban vaping, right? But some of them are turning around, and to me, that's the most exciting part, right? Because we all travel here. Today we're here, next week we're in Italy, then back somewhere else, right? Obviously, South America is opening up to the whole vaping experience. I think, in the sense of kind of like marketing as a whole. Vaping in itself, is going to be a huge thing. Obviously, there's a lot of good companies that continue promoting their products and stuff like that. So I think down the road is basically we have that global marketing to push our brands out there, be responsible of what message we relaying to it, and I think that's it's still going to be a huge market for us for vaping.
Sorry, Brendan?
I think you just touched on the most important thing at the end, which is responsible marketing. Mm-hmm. Every country has their particular things. One of the biggest challenges for all of us is that we believe in vaping, and we don't see it as this deep evil. Now, acquiring customers that were not smokers originally is one of the saddest moments, to be honest with you. I don't think that was necessarily the case 3 years ago where people were just looking to expand this industry. I think there has been a lot of responsibility there, and we realize how many smokers there are in the world and how can we better their lifestyle and better the people around them and better the effects of secondhand smoking into their families and whatnot. That has been the biggest challenge. But ultimately, everyone, I'm sure here, and I'll speak for myself though, firmly believes in what vaping can do for the smoking community as an alternative. But here in America, for instance, we can't make any health claims. We can't say that this is not smoking. We can't say a number of things, right? There's places in the European Union and England now after Brexit. These countries actually believe that they believe the health studies,
Absolutely.
which are coming out, right?
The studies by the MHRA are so far more advanced than anything I've seen here.
Right. Right.
For Americans, they have to really seek out that knowledge because it's not being put in front of their face. They're seeing
a lot of misinformation.
Much different.
Absolutely.
There's probably way more misinformation on the nightly news.
It's constant. I mean, you hear it on different radio stations. They joke about popcorn lung here and there, and there's only been
than smoking.
I had a waitress come up to me recently and say that. She said she worked for a radiologist, and it's worse for you because the lungs stay wet.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't even know where to go about that, But granted, none of us here are scientists. None of us here are doctors. We are going to listen to what is told to us. We are going to listen to, hopefully, the facts. And the facts seem to be not changing, which is this is a better alternative for you, right? There's responsibility in marketing to, again, I go back to challenging the industry. This is a big issue is for the years we heard from distros, oh, if you could just make a brand, like a classy brand, I can do a lot with it. We can be responsible. And then you see these other brands come out of, I won't use anybody's example, but I think we all know who we're talking about here. And these brands sell immediately, right? Mm-hmm. So now we have families to feed, we have employees to keep working. We want to grow to the next level. We all see the next step ahead, but how do we get there without engaging in that particular thing? I don't think anyone when they started this industry had deep enough pockets to survive without making some compromises, right? But now certain people have had that money. We have the ability to make the compromises what's better for the industry overall, right? And as you said about the smoke tricks, the thing is, but these people still, the people that are engaging in that culture were some of the strongest advocates to begin with, right? So we can't really villainize them, but at the same time, it's baggage we have to deal with right now, right? And there's a lot of misunderstanding. But when it comes to marketing in the future, obviously we're going to adhere to everything that's necessary, the warning labels, the right sizing. And I've heard from a number of Instagram platforms and social media platforms or marketing platforms, oh, my engagement's going to go down, this and that. And again, we can't forget that this is some people's business, right? So I can't specifically call anyone out or villainize them for what they're engaging in. They're doing the best they can, right? And I think I would encourage any smoker, anyone with a smoker in their world, whether it be sub-ohm or salts, whatever it may be, to try that for a week and tell me you can't breathe easier, right? I mean, some things don't have to go down to science. Some things really can come to, seeing is believing, right? And I think a lot of those stories are important. It was during the hurricane in Florida. We had a family reach out to us and say, I don't want to go back to cigarettes. We're going to be evacuated. Can you please rush this package? So we did, as any of us here would, to help that person out, right? And they sent us this lovely email that said, you have no idea what this means to me. Like, if I had gone back to a cigarette, I could. And we don't think about those little things, right? So as you have with your device, is a perfect example. This is easy to people to approach, right? This is people engage. It's a plug and play, right? That's really important to these people that where the industry is going, right? And the Cigalites, as you came out with a while ago, salts can make those more effective now, right? Absolutely. But ultimately, vaping has a high threshold of understanding, right? And when you're home in your house, you can take the time. We used to have to cook the cotton. You remember that, right? Just cook the cotton to get the imperfections out of it and whatnot. But right now, there is an easier level. You put the tank, blah, blah, blah. But when you're running away from a hurricane, as an example, right, that might not be the first thing that comes to your mind. Did I remember my extra batteries, right? These are an issue, okay? So if you can pick up something at whether it be a convenience store or a local vape shop or wherever you evacuate to, or take something on the run, that's where I'm a strong proponent of salts. Salt's the easiest long-term solution to quitting vaping. But I think the marketing is important to pay attention to the regulations around. If we play friendly, people might play friendly back in return, right? But what I stress, whether whoever may be listening to this, any regulatory body, is we're going to push as far as it can take. We're going to listen to the rules, we're going to adhere to the rules. But again, we believe in this in our core, right? So whether compromises are not going to be made, we're going to push it as far as it is. And I think a lot of the responsibility not just comes down to us, it comes down to parents and schools and these places to talk to their congressmen and to talk to their kids, right? I mean, when I was a kid in high school, we talked recently, the announcement was it's becoming an epidemic, right? 12%, I think it was, of kids have tried a vapor product. I think someone correct me if I'm wrong, I think that was the quote. I'm telling you, I had a nice upbringing, it was an affluent town, parents were involved. Well, more than 12% of kids were actively smoking.
Yeah.
More than they were actively smoking, right?
It's around 25%, I think, was youth smoking rates. Historically, it's been about 25%.
Okay.
So if you look at the historical youth smoking rate now, which is down to almost like 5%,
right,
and you add in the number who have tried vaping, we're at about where we were. I mean, it's always been a rebellious thing.
Yes.
Either you did it because you knew your parents were going to hate it,
yeah, and
that's never going to change.
Sure.
And there's going to be all kinds of activities.
Every generation tries to kill themselves in a different way, right?
Exactly.
That's what it seems to be. But then they learn and they get educated and they this and that. If it's 95% better for you, I'm not making that claim here in the United States. The England's making the claim, right? Then maybe this is not such an issue. But I can't possibly. I mean, you wouldn't call an epidemic something that's 12% and have tried it, right?
The talk of an epidemic really is. I mean, how else could they go after the industry? Because the studies are pretty clear. So it really was the end around was, we need to find something that these guys are doing that's really bad.
It's a scary word.
Yeah, it's a really bad. Epidemic's a really scary word.
How can you subscribe drug theory unless it's a disease?
Exactly.
Exactly.
I don't know how it's all going to play out. I mean, the Washington Post broke some news recently. We don't know if it's really true with the FDA, the new rules, but we'll see.
And for 2019 and beyond, does Amplebox have anything interesting planned?
Well, first off, you missed a calling as a motivational speaker.
Yeah.
If you want to like ditch Solace and just go on the road, you can make it work. I mean, 2019 and beyond, I mean, more than anything, and I think anybody is going to be able to kind of attest to this, I mean, besides obviously marketing responsibly, exactly that. I mean, in the past, obviously, we were in a closed ecosystem. We only had to market to people who were in that ecosystem. Now we actually have the public eye and scrutiny and all sorts of other channels that are looking at us right now. So it's important that we project correctly in all marketing that we do. But going forward, I mean, more than anything else, I'm going to just harp on it again, direct to consumer. It's clear now, just like it was in every kind of other industry before, every marketing dollar you have needs to be going into direct consumer marketing. Focusing on customer acquisition, focusing on getting your actual brand and name and everything out there. Obviously, again, responsibly to the correct people that you want to convert. But I mean, really looking at things like SEO, really like nickel and diming influencer marketing, all of that stuff to get the most bang for your buck. And I think it's only going to become more and more advanced in 2019 and beyond for sure.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is a big room. There's a lot of players here from all over the world. You guys have been exposed to, I'm sure, almost every company in the vape space. I want to know, in the next 5 years, who do you think is still going to be around in this industry?
Who wants to take that one first, guys? Anyone?
I'll let you guys decide.
Whoever answers the question first is not going to make the list.
Someone that's really doing it right and that has their eyes on the long game, besides yourselves, of course.
I'll start. Obviously, the big one, the Juul. I'm going to say, obviously, I think out of they're the big ones, they're functioning like a tobacco company in a way, right? They're doing everything right, I think, from the hardware, from the juice, right, formulation, marketing. I've seen some big companies over years to just disappear, It's very difficult. I think that's probably one company I'd say probably would be around, whether they get bought out or not, I don't know, but that's one company I see, yeah.
Wow, 5 years, that would put us at 2023, right? It could be nobody. it could be zero.
Right?
Yeah. I would agree. I think Juul is done pretty much everything right. That first marketing campaign they did seems to be coming back to bite them in the foot. And it wasn't like they were trying to use models to go after youth. They just had not a very good director of marketing because I wasn't there any longer. And, and they just tried
Sounds like you still work for him, man. I don't know what I'm saying.
No, but I mean, I think certainly Big Tobacco is going to have a stake in the game, whether it's with Heat Not Burn or with their vaping products. I think that you'll see probably a number of these companies and maybe a number of new companies. It changes so fast. Like to your point, there were some companies that were dominant in this industry 2-3 years ago, and then poof, they just go away. So it's going to be a really interesting landscape. My prediction.
I would say the companies that are going to survive are the ones that learn how to work with each other, as I mentioned earlier.
Yeah.
As I totally agree with you. Big Tobacco is going to have a piece of the space, but I think just like the regulatory bodies and somewhat of ourselves, they don't know where to go from their left from the right as well. So there's a lot to understand, and there's so much driving. There's consumerism driving this around the regulations, right? But we have a number of things well laid out for us in regulations, despite the lack of clarity from here and there, right? And there's also a global market, so there's going to be people that exist outside of the United States that learn how to cope with the heavy regulations here and what's speculated to be a large investment through PMTAs, right? But there's different levels, right? So we had the first one, which is 8.8 predicate products, right? So there's a number of companies dramatically lying about this piece, right? There's a lot of companies that they probably don't even have their fake paperwork in line, let alone their real one, right? Yeah. So that's the first piece of where this is going to start going down, right? The next piece, in my opinion, is obviously the health records of next year, right? Who's going to test, who has the money, who has the funding, and also who's going to do it properly. And I think the only way to do it properly, because of the lack of communication, is to do it as an industry, is to communicate with each other. How are you doing it? How are you doing it? How are we working together, right? And there's I would probably say a good 20 companies or so that are doing it right, and there's 20 companies that do have the right objection and have the right pockets to pull this one off, right? And then the next levels will ultimately be, how do you play nice? How do you cooperate? And how do you not become a target of the FDA? I do believe we are at a position right now where people are actually engaging with brands that are not necessarily childish. They're engaging with brands that are doing it responsibly. And a number of these, Facebook groups of the people that used to be the cloud chasers, if you will, right, and the tricksters are the ones that are not just part of the rumor mill, unfortunately, but they're trying to learn. They're trying to hear what is right, and they're trying to engage with other people to educate them accordingly. And I think that's going to be, it's going to be a mixture between working with the customer, working with the companies, working with big tobacco, and working with the regulatory bodies. I hear a lot on these forums that big tobacco is working against us, and I can't specifically tell you that's not true, but it seems a lot more to me that pharma and other companies are working against us. We're probably in a similar boat. It's not a boat I wanted to be in. You know what I mean? I mean, in all intents and purposes, I would consider them an evil empire, but we might have to work together to tackle a common enemy, and the enemy is not the people trying to keep vape out of their kids' hands. The enemy is the people not allowing vape to get into the hands of people that dramatically need it. So.
This man is quotable.
I know.
It's ridiculous. No, I mean, let's see, companies Bankcard USA. I'm going to just come right out. It's probably still going to be around.
This is a man.
Chubby Gorilla.
Chubby Gorilla. Probably still going to be there, for sure. But I mean, companies like e-cig distributors, for sure, Vape Wild, Avail Vapor. I mean, ones that have really kind of established themselves as being forerunners and in a way that is translatable to other spaces. I mean, if we look at worst case, like you touched on, how many people are really going to be around in 2023? If we touch on worst case scenario for the industry, it's the people who are going to be able to easily shift and translate into other spaces and be flexible and build on the expertise and infrastructure that they've created over the last few years, and more importantly, the relationships as well to try to make that
I think
space
resources
work.
as well.
Resources,
as you had
of
mentioned with
course.
the PMTAs. I mean, how much is it going to cost to get one flavor on the market? Who knows? There's a lot of speculation, but unfortunately, it's going to come down to deep pockets. So the companies, this industry has been amazing that the barrier to entry wasn't very big. You have a lot of people that didn't need to raise millions of dollars to launch a vape company, but in the coming years, if you didn't put away a few $1 million to be able to transition, no matter how compliant you are, no matter how much you want to work and play nice, you're not going to make it through unless you have some pretty good resources to do that.
Yep.
So,
I would like to add one more
please.
company. Cotton will be there.
But to be fair, look at it. Look at the brands up here, right? They're not irresponsible, right? I remember when you guys launched, it was really well done. It was sophisticated. You knew someone that knew what they were doing was behind the brand, and you knew you were in it for the long run, right? And there's some of those people that actually hit the market, and immediately someone sophisticated is behind this. They know what they're doing, and that will continue to be.
that's a good point. So VapExpo has expanded. As you know, right next door we have CBD.io taking place for the very first time. I'm curious whether personally or professionally, if any of you are embracing CBD, and if so, how?
I don't want to start.
Yeah, I'll start. It's definitely very interesting. It's very interesting. I look over there and I look at the space, and I talk to some of the vendors who are over in that area, and it's very reminiscent of, exactly when I got back into the space, like early 2014, 2015.
Absolutely.
It's like all wide-eyed and optimism, and it seems to be a great product that people stand behind and really, really believe in. And that makes me feel warm and bubbly, and from a purely business standpoint, the margins sound amazing. So I am interested in the space. We'll probably do, and Samplebox will probably do a bit more scouting in that area before we decide to make a move.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
Brendan?
CBD, it's very interesting. It's very true. There's companies such as Mad Hatter with CBD Effects that have done it for so long and actually have a brand in the space, which I can appreciate and respect. The biggest struggle with CBD to me is I don't know one consumer of CBD that understands it fully properly. I think a lot of people still see. Personally, I believe the biggest market for it is the baby boomer generation, is the people suffering from different pains and aches and issues, right? But this is the same generation that was told this is a class 1, felony or issue, right? What is it?
Schedule 1.
Schedule 1. So it's really hard to understand. I've tried CBD that honestly I could tell you is no better than snake oil, and I tried CBD that actually does give you a relief or an effect. But the biggest issue I think there is behind CBD is separating it from the marijuana space in particular, and then from the subculture therein of marijuana is bringing it to full fruition of everyone in understanding what it can do, why it can do, a little clarity behind what actually is allowed. There's a farm bill still out there. Is this going to pass? Is it not going to pass? It seems like it is, but is that zero THC? Is CBD as effective with zero THC? There's all these pieces, right? And the problem is we're in this industry. They're right there. We can talk to anyone and learn a little bit more. The FDA's in Washington. Yeah. What the hell do they? What do they know about this? And obviously they can look at studies and science, but that's the biggest challenge I have. But I do believe that's going to be the next fad. And the first company to really establish themselves as in a consumer base as you do is people coming back every time, or people like you that are asking for those 30s because they love them, right? That actually know the brand. And I know your brand really well. Anyone that sub-owns still uses that stuff, Yeah. So the fact is, it's going to be. I still can yet say there's a company that has returning customers that only will use their product, right?
Yeah.
I don't know a lot about CBD, to be honest with you. I've only tried it a couple of times, and with various degrees of success. But Max, I agree with you. Looking over there reminds me of like 2014. The booths are a little less sophisticated. The wide-eyed optimism.
People still have hope behind the eyes.
Still have hope.
Not dead inside yet.
And I think it's an interesting combination because I don't think you really need to vape CBD. I much prefer a tincture or an edible myself. But I think the two industries are tied together in that you can vape it, but it's also, they're two very new industries. So I did hear, and this could be a rumor, that Walmart and another major retailer were here not for the vape today, but they were here for CBD. So that could be a really interesting development. If you have a company like Walmart that says, hey, we want to put in CBD as a wellness program in our stores, in our however many thousands of stores, that could be a game changer. And the companies that can, adapt to work with a Walmart, with all of their compliance, with all of the logistics that go behind, being able to support a customer that big. It's going to take a big company. I'm not sure if there are any in there. If there are, God bless them, and it'll be good for the industry.
Right back at that point, you look at companies in the vape space, they got same kind of distribution deals like that with big box retailers. How did they transition? Where are they now? Right? Yeah. It'll be interesting to see.
Those are those big players that fell apart we talked about earlier, right?
No, not naming names.
Space Jam.
Yeah, so I'm same way. I don't know too much about CBD, but I already can tell over the last 2-3 years that as CBD is growing in itself, the milligram levels are going up, right? So I think they're still trying to figure out. I still talk to people, be like, I didn't feel anything, and then now we start hearing like, well, you really need to take this for 2 weeks for your body to kind of start processing it, type of stuff, right? So there's still plenty of unknowns, kind of like where the e-cig days back in the days, like, what is this vape, or I don't know what I should do with it, you know what I mean? I think we're there. There's very early, and I think companies are going to continue improving and making it better and better, and we'll start getting a better understanding. I think that industry is definitely going to stay, right? And so it's just, we're going to see where it goes in the next 5 years, 10 years.
All right, well, yeah, I'm curious to see. I think we all are. This has been a great show for them, from what I understand, next door, and obviously for VapExpo, bringing it here to Las Vegas. So I think we can expect to be doing a few more of these on U.S. ground very soon. Gentlemen, you all brought up fantastic points. I want to thank you so much for taking some time to sit down with me and the viewers. I know everyone has a lot of work to do. The awards are coming up. Did everyone submit?
One flavor.
Okay, which one?
Lucky Bastard.
What flavor profile is that?
It's a creamy vanilla, toasted almond, caramel, and naturally extracted tobacco.
It's good.
Yeah, you tried it?
I don't need to. I've got tens of thousands of people who have it. Tells me it's good.
Well, I wish you best of luck in the awards. When we come back, we will be announcing the winners at the VapExpo Las Vegas, so stay tuned. But for now, we're out.